Elizabeth, for that really kind introduction and for inviting me to be part of this super exciting panel. I'm so excited to learn more about the panelists and their career trajectories today. It's so cool to hear about recent graduates, Liza Panova, Aubrey Phillips, and Evan Epstein. I'll start with Liza. Liza graduated in UW from 2021 in the ChemE department and works at Pluristyx. And Aubrey and Evan both graduated UW ChemE in 2020. And Aubrey is at just Evotec Biologics, and Evan is at BMS. And I think it probably makes sense for each of you to kind of give your own introduction beyond that, if you'd like. And maybe I will ask Liza to go first.
Sure. So hi, everybody. It's really nice to be here. My name is Liza. As she mentioned, I graduated from UW ChemE's department in 2021. I also graduated with a minor in chemistry. So it's always really funny to tell people that I graduated ChemE with a minor in chemistry. But I think that's part of, why I went into the biotech field. I really love biology and chemistry. I'm also currently pursuing a master's degree at UW in pharmaceutical bioengineering. And as she mentioned, I currently work at Pluristyx, which is a small biotech company in Seattle, which focuses on stem cell research, characterization, and scale-up.
That's super cool. Thank you, Liza. Aubrey, you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Aubrey. I graduated from UW ChemE in 2020. I am originally from Oklahoma, but I fell in love with Seattle during my time at UW. And so I found my job after college in the Seattle area to stick around. So I'm currently working at Just Evotec Biologics as a process engineer. And through our work, we are manufacturing new medicines for clinical trials.
Very cool. Thanks, Aubrey. Evan?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Evan. I use he, him pronouns. I am also a transplant. I grew up in Boston and I moved out to Seattle to go to UW. And I also fell in love with it and didn't want to leave when I graduated in 2020. So I started working for Bristol Myers Squibb. They have a facility up in Bothell where I am right now. And I started in manufacturing, but I now work in quality assurance for our FDA-approved therapy. It's a CAR T-cell therapy called Breyanzi.
Very cool. Thanks very much. It's really exciting to hear how diverse your roles are and the paths that you've chosen to go in biotech. And I think one thing that I'm curious about is how each of your day-to-day lives are in your roles, in your positions. Aubrey, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. One thing about my day-to-day work is that it is very different and can never predict what's going to happen the next day. And I tend to get a little more bored with things that are stagnant. And so I like a bit of the chaos of my role. So on different days, I'll be in the manufacturing facility doing hands-on troubleshooting work, modifying equipment. And the next day I'll be in meetings and doing computer work. And then the next day I'll be visiting one of our other facilities and working with vendors. And so it's really a diverse role and keeps me entertained.
That's awesome. How about you, Liza? What's your day like?
Yeah, I actually have some similarities with Aubrey. I feel like since I started, I have not had one day that looks like any other day that I've had before. I also love the little bit of chaos in my life. I definitely would also be a little bored with a similar, day to day. Similarly, I also spend about half my day usually, or sometimes the full day, but working in our research lab. So I'm part of the R&D team at my company. So I do a lot of wet lab research. And then the other part of my day, I spend usually like in meetings or designing experiments or putting together presentations for clients. So a lot of diversity and a lot of really fun stuff.
That's awesome. It's amazing to hear how many different hats you guys can wear in the course of your job and that you're able to juggle all of that with such prowess. Evan, what about you? What's your day like?
Yeah, I can relate to you both in that I enjoy having some variation to my days. I will say that when I started working in manufacturing, I loved it. I did. For those of you who are interested in working in manufacturing, I highly recommend it. It was a great way to get into the industry. I enjoyed it very much and I learned a lot. After about a year, though, I was pretty ready for something new, which is why I moved into quality assurance. My days are a little more structured. I have a pretty clear set of responsibilities. So we have governing rules and procedures, whether they're our own internal ones or ones set by regulatory agencies of multiple different countries that we have to follow. And my job is really to help make sure that we do that as a site. So when we deviate from our procedures, I'm involved in triages, which that tends to be the part that changes the most between days, because who knows what event is going to come my way. And so I get to use some like problem solving there and see different things. But it's kind of that every day, and then writing sort of our regulatory deviations. Those are my two main responsibilities, and I do those every day.
That's awesome. Sounds like you're all kept on your toes and kept responsive, which is really cool. So I have a question from one of the students. They are curious about whether you get to work with other engineers, other chemies, for example, in the line of your work, or if not, who do you most often interact with in your day-to-day responsibilities?
You want just one of us to jump in?
Liza, why don't you start?
Okay. So the majority of my team that I work with most closely day to day is PhD scientists or other research associates who have bachelor's degrees in biology or biochem or something like that. We do have chemies as part of our process development team that's part of my company. So I don't necessarily work on a day-to-day basis with a lot of other engineers, but there are other engineers at our company.
That's really cool. How about you, Evan?
Yeah, I'll say that specifically where I work, there are a bunch of Wazoo chemies. So if you want to come compete with some of them and show them that you're better, come to BMS.
That's awesome. You're representing, I see.
Yeah.
Very cool. How about you, Aubrey?
So my direct team that I work on is 90% ChemE, so it's a very strong ChemE representation. And then with a lot of the teams that we work closely with, they also have chemical engineering or other related engineering backgrounds. So it's an engineering strong company.
That's brilliant. So given the ChemE representation in your company and your team, how does ChemE inform the work that you're doing day to day now, Aubrey?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things that I've taken with me from UW ChemE was the problem solving skills that were really ingrained into us. Before in school, there's a lot of like cut and dry answers that you have a question, you have a clear answer, that's it. And UW ChemE really gets you into that uncomfortable zone of like, I don't even know how to begin looking for this answer, and how am I going to start working through that? How am I going to collaborate with my peers to find that answer? And it really, got me into more of a collaborative problem solving headspace. And that's something that I use every single day at work. It's a very collaborative environment where we're getting faced with a lot of problems that we haven't seen before, and we need to be comfortable being uncomfortable in those moments. And beyond that, our work also requires just a lot of engineering background. When we're working with a lot of fluid streams, a lot of engineering principles, fluid dynamics come, we may not be directly writing equations related to them, but you need those principles and those understandings to be able to effectively design equipment and troubleshoot any problems that pop up.
That's really cool. Liza, I'm curious about how you're leveraging your ChemE education and those principles that you learned in a team where there are very few other engineers.
Yeah. So one thing that I have definitely been told is that people appreciate my engineering insight into things. I think that as engineers, we're taught to approach problems very logically and kind of like lay out all of the things that we have in this problem before starting it. Like we don't, just jump right in and start something without appreciating the full scale of it. So I think I definitely agree with Aubrey in that problem solving and how to problem solve and think about problems is something that I've taken from UW ChemE. I think there's also a lot of different engineering principles involved in cell biology. So a lot of heat transfer, a lot of, different metabolism things that definitely I rely on my engineering background to be able to think about.
Oh, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I see that as well in my research, which is like really cool. So Evan, I'm curious as to how, like, perhaps differently you might have used your ChemE skills on the manufacturing side versus the quality assurance side, or are they kind of analogous in how you've applied your education?
Yeah. So I'll definitely reiterate problem solving as sort of the main big thing that we get from ChemE. I don't know if this is getting too specific, but in job interviews, that's definitely the thing to highlight. It's the thing that has worked for me personally. But I think part of it is also, we're really good at analyzing systems and sort of like establishing the systems in your mind. You have to take in lots of rules, whether they're mathematical rules or physical rules or chemical rules, and you have to hold them all at the same time and see how they work together to create this system and how they govern how things should work within that system. That has been helpful for me in quality, where my day-to-day does not involve very much engineering, but it is very much take our system and find improvements, find things that are going wrong in the solutions to those deviations, and hold in your mind all of the different rules and constraints that apply.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, so many of the principles apply to so many different downstream jobs, right? And I think that's a real strength of the major. I'm curious, Evan, how did, like, when you were starting out in doing your major, how did you sort of go from the core ChemE principles that you learned to bridge to your interest in biotech?
Yeah. Honestly, I owe a lot of that to Dr. Nance. I was in her lab for over 2 years, and that was how I started to get into biologically relevant research and applications of what I was learning in class. She also, I don't know if she still does this, but she offered a class on nanoengineering in biological systems, and I took that. So you can find resources that are out there. For me, it was Dr. Nansen and the class and the research that she provided with me that can empower you to sort of tailor your education to what you want to do. That's how I got into it.
That's really cool. What about you, Aubrey?
So I actually did not have any direct experiences that were related to this industry in college, but I did want to, just as a caveat, say you can still succeed in a field without, having been in a lab or having done an internship. That was something that terrified me when I was in college. I felt like if I don't have something beyond, my classroom experiences, that what if no one will want to hire me? Don't worry, someone will want to hire you.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Liza, do you have anything you'd like to share about how you sort of bridge that transition?
Yeah, so I knew before applying to ChemE that I would want to focus in more of like the biological science aspect of it. So I had kind of been looking at other classes, like I took, the Bio180, Bio200 series. A lot of the electives that I took outside of ChemE were bio-focused. I also was in a genomics lab my sophomore year. So I kind of found the bridges a little bit outside of ChemE, but one thing that I definitely want to highly recommend to people if you're interested is go to like evening talks that professors give, or like attend seminars with people talking about the subjects that you are interested in. I always find those like super inspiring. I still do. I actually attended Professor Nance's engineering lecture, I think 2 months ago or something, and it was really, really cool. So definitely still highly recommend doing that. But yeah.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I think it's really inspiring, and to hear you guys sort of take that initiative outside of like the standard coursework to find ways to bridge your passions and integrate that with your core ChemE experience. I think that makes a lot of sense. I guess a question for you, Aubrey, like given that that you weren't necessarily expecting to go into to biotech out of while you were doing your degree, like how did you kind of make that transition afterwards? Like, were there specific steps that helped you prepare for the career that you have now, either before graduation or in the months afterwards?
I wouldn't say that there were any steps in particular. I think in any industry, there's just going to be a big learning curve, and the people hiring understand that you can try to prepare all you can, but it just takes exposure to that industry to really get into it. What got me into this field is seeing some impacts of this field firsthand in my immediate family. I had some illnesses, and I saw how meaningful new medicines can be to people's families like mine, and that's what really made me passionate about joining the field.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. I guess I'm curious now, Evan, what inspires you to go into biotech and to choose your career path?
Yeah. I do work on an approved therapeutic. So we have patients all over the country We have patients in Europe. We have patients in Japan. 2 weeks ago, one patient and their family showed up unannounced at our manufacturing plant up in Bothell just to say hi and say thank you. And it really comes down to that patient impact. I think that's why we're all doing it. I imagine if you're interested in this field, that's why you want to do it too. This is a really good way for us to use our knowledge to help others. And I have no regrets. This is what I want to be doing.
That's amazing. I think that really emphasizes how direct the impact that many of you guys can achieve with your background. And that's so inspiring. That's so cool. Liza, do you have anything that you wanted to share about like what inspired you to pursue this path?
Yeah, I knew kind of when I went to college that I wanted to make an impact in either one of two areas. One of those was, the medical field. I knew that I was not cut out to be a doctor or a nurse or anything like that. I do get a little squeamish. So I knew that I wanted to make an impact, and this is how I could see myself making an impact in this field. So I think similar things that inspire Aubrey and Evan also inspire me as well.
That's really cool. I guess to sort of flip that question around, Liza, given that you were interested in medicine and biology from the beginning, like what inspired you to take on ChemE as your major? Because I mean, ChemE isn't a very easy field. I remember that when I was taking classes, many of my classmates who were like physicists and math majors were kind of making fun of me because I had chosen the path of pain with all of the extra course load. So what made you inspire to take that on?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there was one of two areas that I really knew I wanted to make an impact. The second area was environmental. And given that I hadn't quite, when I was picking a major, I hadn't quite chosen which direction I wanted to go in. I chose ChemE partially because it's so broad and you can apply ChemE into virtually like any area you choose. Like it's going to be valuable anywhere. So I think it was partially because I was being a little bit wishy-washy and didn't quite know what I wanted. So I was like, I'm just going to learn everything. And the way to learn everything was the path of pain in ChemE.
I think that's completely fair. That resonates a lot with my experience as well. Aubrey, what about you? How did you pick ChemE as your path?
I have basically the exact same answer. I also, didn't know for sure what field I wanted to go into, but I saw how many high impact fields that ChemE could lead to, from sustainable energy to transportation to the food industry to biotech. There's just so many impactful careers that can come out of this, and so I loved how broad my options would be.
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. What about you, Evan? Did you sort of fall into a similar camp?
My answer is a little different.
All right, awesome.
I had absolutely no idea what ChemE was when I joined the department. We're asked to make such big decisions when we're so young. And this is maybe my own personal failing, but I was not prepared for the decision of choosing my major, but I sort of hit a deadline that UW kind of hits us with. And I looked around and I said, I am good at chemistry and I'm good at physics. And I kind of like maybe one or both of them. And then people tell you that if you get an engineering degree, you'll be set for life. And those were truly the only things that I knew at that point in time. And I thought ChemE was a combination of physics and chemistry, and that was very wrong. I would later learn, and I'm sure that most of you are all learning. But the reason why I sort of stuck with it is that I don't know, I kind of found it fun. It's very math heavy, and that's something that I love. And then I discovered what they and others knew before joining the field, which is that it does have a very broad impact. And I knew early on that sort of some of the traditional ones of oil and gas and, chemical manufacturing, those weren't going to be for me. But there was a whole other world that I could explore, that I was empowered to explore with this degree. So I'm glad I did it, but that's maybe not the best pitch if we're trying to sell someone on ChemE.
I think that I think that you did find that it was a very flexible degree. So I think that's a pretty good sales pitch right there. I'm curious how in your day-to-day jobs, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing, and maybe how are your how were the principles that you learned in ChemE helping you to address those challenges? Aubrey?
I think. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So what's the hardest part about your job? And if are any of the pieces that you've learned from ChemE helping you to address those challenges?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest challenges is that there are so many things to do. There's so many opportunities for improvement. There's so many projects that can be taken on, and it's hard not to get really excited and try to stick your toe in everything. And so definitely prioritization, I would say, is my biggest day-to-day challenge. There's so many exciting engineering problems to be solved, and I just want to solve them all. And I think ChemE did prepare me well for that, because it does require a heavy workload and a lot of prioritization, but those are really important skills to bring with you into your career.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And you were well trained as a ChemE to think about optimization, right? What about you, Liza? What do you think is the hardest part of your job?
Yeah, I agree with Aubrey in the prioritization is very difficult. I also in my job definitely have been yes, I want to do that project and I want to do that project and all of that sounds really cool. So I definitely agree with you there. I think for me, one of the other hardest parts is when multiple things go wrong in a row and you need to completely stop and assess at a wider scale of okay, where do we go from here? Small things can go wrong in your day to day, and you need to learn how to be flexible and pivot and make decisions. And that's definitely something that comes with experience. But when multiple things go wrong in a row and you're just oh gosh, okay, I need to really full stop and reassess what I'm doing here. How does this affect the project timeline? All of the things like that. And I think ChemE definitely prepares you for that kind of in the difficulty of our assignments and our tests, because you're under a time pressure, and sometimes you can be solving a problem a completely wrong way, and you realize that after you've invested maybe 20 minutes of a 50-minute test, and you're oh gosh, okay, I need to full stop, I need to reevaluate this whole test. How do I solve this, and how do I continue on while trying to get the most done in the time that I have left? So I think kind of being able to do that under certain constraints. So, in tests, it's the time pressure. So stuff like that. I think it prepares you pretty well for that.
Yeah. I think that absolutely is true. I guess maybe as a follow-up question, did you see yourself as a particularly strong student while you were doing your degree here at UW, or not? Right? Like, how, if you didn't feel that way, how did you manage the imposter syndrome and all of the sort of pressures of navigating the path of pain that is the ChemE degree?
Yeah, I 100% did not feel like a very great student while I was in just the program. And I feel like just in college in general. But I think one way to battle that is definitely to have like a close network of friends, because they're a little bit more removed from you than you are. So they can, see that like, hey, you're really good at this aspect of this, or you're really good at, like I was really good at presenting things. And my group, like my classmates that I often formed a study group with, really made an effort to have me do, the thing that I'm good at, and helped me with the things that I was not good at. So definitely, I would say having a close group of friends to support you through the ChemE process is extremely helpful.
Yeah, no, that resonates so much. So valuable. Evan, what about you? How was sort of your self-image as a student, and how did you sort of overcome those challenges?
Yeah. Do I see myself as a strong student? Kind of. I mean, it's hard to answer that question yes without feeling a little cocky, but I mean, I did think of myself as a strong student. I worked pretty hard on it and did pretty well, but I'm just gonna say that for people that don't feel that way, the life beyond school is so disconnected from your performance within school, and the hurdles that you're facing now, they feel pretty big, but when you're 6 months past graduation, they're nothing. I mean, like, they don't come with you. Have faith in the fact that you're learning, you're gaining incredibly valuable skills, regardless of whether or not the ways that we test those skills in academic settings result in like good grades, because those are not necessarily the best ways of testing whether or not you have acquired skills.
Yeah.
They will come with you after graduation, and you will be able to use them for the rest of your life.
I think that's a very wise and long-sighted perspective. So appreciate that. Thanks, Evan. Aubrey, do you have anything you want to add about like sort of how you viewed yourself as a student, and how you sort of managed that and made that sort of work for you?
Yeah. So I did see myself as a strong student in school, but that did not mean that I was not susceptible to imposter syndrome as well. It's like, even maybe someone you may be looking at and say, wow, they've really got it under control. Like, they're sitting there worrying about something that you're doing that they're not. Everyone feels that to a degree. And in my case, as I mentioned earlier, I was never in a lab. I never had an internship. And I also didn't have a job during school. And so I'm looking at my peers who are all doing all these things on top of their classes. And I felt like I was, just trying to keep on top of my classes, and that was all I could manage. But okay. Like Lisa said, having a network of people in ChemE just to support you is really, really important. That was definitely something that I struggled with more when we made the transition to online learning for Evan and I, it was only for our last quarter, our spring quarter of our senior year, but I felt the imposter syndrome get a lot stronger during that, because you weren't seeing everyone every day and talking about like, how are you feeling about this project? Is it going well for you? Okay, no, sweet, we're on the same page. So I think making those connections with your peers is super, super important.
I think that's super valuable, like both in class and afterwards, beyond, right? Mm-hmm. So to switch gears a little bit, Liza, you mentioned that a lot of the folks that you interact with were PhD or other scientists with higher degrees. Have you ever considered doing a secondary degree? And if not, like, how did you sort of make that decision between going straight into industry or sort of going on to grad school?
Yeah, so I am currently pursuing a master's degree in pharmaceutical bioengineering. So when I was graduating, I knew, or I suspected, that I might want to go back to school. And I kind of had a suspicion that it probably wouldn't be for a PhD unless something like really moved me to get a PhD. And I think I knew I wanted to get some industry experience first to decide, like, you know, is a secondary degree really necessary for me and where I want to go? And I think as an engineer, if you don't want to go get a PhD and you still want to succeed in the biomedical field, I think it can be a little bit daunting because you are surrounded by, you know, all of these PhD scientists. But I think you can definitely like find a niche for yourself and like wiggle your way in and definitely like make up for it in experience. At least that's that's my plan. So, you know, I'll let you know in 10 years if it works out. But I think that I am really excited to get my master's degree, and probably will not pursue a PhD is where I'm currently standing. But again, I think I think some people treat it as like an all or nothing decision. Like either you go to industry or you go get your PhD, and there's like no in between, and there's, you know, no time to change your mind later on. And I think that that's just not true. So I think anything that you decide to do, like you have time to change your mind and change your mind again. I think for a lot of graduating students, at least for me, I was really focused on like, okay, I'm going to get a job and then that's it. Like, I'm just going to work. And, you know, I have to make all these decisions right now and there's no time afterwards. But if you think about where you are in terms of like your life and your career track, like you are just starting out. So you have like so much time to like make whatever decisions you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really resonates. As someone with a PhD, I would say that I would not recommend it for everybody. You sort of really need to want to go through that path. And you know, there are benefits to it, but there are also, I think, very real challenges, and not just sort of intellectual ones. So it's good to sort of think through that decision carefully after you've had some sort of insight into sort of all of the options. Evan, I'm curious as to like how you decided to sort of choose industry versus sort of more classes.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that I'd spent my entire waking life in school when I graduated from college, and I was ready to see what life was like outside of school. That was just how I felt, and that was sort of a personal thing, and I wanted to explore what life meant outside of school. I will say that from talking to other people in industry who have been here for longer, from what I understand, it used to be much harder to get into without a graduate degree, and that is changing. it is getting easier and easier to get into biopharmaceuticals and biotech with just a bachelor's. The barriers to entry are getting lower. My mentor at Just very much said that he believed that the only reason to go get a PhD was if you were like really passionate about the science. That was something that you really wanted to devote your time to, but not to see it as a stepping stone to a position in industry if that is where your long-term goals lie, because you can get there if you start with a bachelor's. The 4+ years that you spend getting a PhD, if you spend those in industry, will get you to more or less the same title and pay. So they may still be a prerequisite for academia, but less and less so for industry. That said, sorry. That said, I'm currently in the middle of applying to medical school, so that's a whole other thing. You do need a second degree in order to do that. If people want to know what that process is like for a ChemE, ask Dr. Nance for my contact info, but I won't go into it too much right now.
Well, congrats. That's awesome. I wish you well with that process.
Thank you.
Maybe to sort of flip completely to, on a different note, how's work-life balance for you as chemical engineers? Like, are you able to, sleep, have a life outside of work in your role? Aubrey?
I would say yes in my case. I would say it's very company specific and something I would always recommend asking about during job interviews. My company is very good about work-life balance, but I have, friends at other companies in the same industry and in different industries that don't have work-life balance. And so it all just depends on the company culture. It's an important thing to get a feel for when you're looking for jobs.
And like, how were you able to kind of suss that out during your interview process? Or were you?
I would just kind of ask straight up, like, do you feel like you have a work-life balance? And you can kind of tell by the hesitation whether, and usually people are always going to give a positive answer, but you can tell if they have to think about it a little too hard that maybe they don't have the best work-life balance.
Fair enough. Liza, what about you?
Yeah, I would say that if you asked me before I became a master's student on top of working full-time, I would have told you yes. Currently, my work-life balance leaves a little bit to be desired, but again, that's mostly because I'm also a part-time student on top of working. So I would say yes for the most part.
It can't be easy. I guess one other question for you that came from the audience. Does your company subsidize your master's degree, or do you kind of have to do that separately on your own?
So kind of. And the reason I say kind of is that I work at a pretty small startup. So the way that they have, been able to compensate me is that I am allowed to take some of the time towards my 40-hour work week and put it instead towards school, and take time during the day to work on school. And I still get compensated the same like that I did before, regardless. So
that's awesome. That's brilliant flexibility. That's really cool. Evan, you have your hands up. Did you wanted to add something? Or was that just
No, yeah. I can also speak to that from sort of like a larger company because I've seen BMS's policy, and they do offer to pay for classes that are directly applicable. Just know that it'll always come with some strings attached, usually in terms of you don't have to repay it if you work there for a certain number of years. So if you look at that and you say that it's worth committing in exchange for those courses, know that option will likely be available to you, at least at larger companies.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for that insight. And thank all of you for all of your brilliant perspectives and insights into your career path, into how awesome ChemE is, and how you were able to navigate the transition from school to beyond that. I learned so much from you, and I am like very much inspired by your trajectories.
Let me see if this works better.
Oh, yes, that works better now.
We'll do a round of applause so that y'all can hear the round of applause.
Yeah.
Thank you all
very much.
time. For everybody in class, just stay tuned.